Now there are several reasons that people go for WPF. That there are complex control requirements that people have. There can be certain things which we don't have in Windows Forms applications, like complex graph creations, for example. We will have to always rely on some third-party controls. And then easy development for complex control development. So it's like I really want to get the complex control developed within few seconds instead of waiting for 7 days. So in that case, people prefer WPF. But there are certain other cases as well. If you already have existing WinForms application working very well and you are looking for one of the WPF feature, let's say graph, or let's say some sort of animation that we saw some time back. So in that case, just for the sake of one feature, will you be going for migration from WinForm to WPF? Maybe no, because converting your entire WinForm into WPF is going to take time. You will require a little of restructuring in your project. So in such cases, what is suggested is, can we think of other approach? That is, can we take the required WPF feature into Windows Forms? Which means, can we take something, can we build something in WPF and can we take it into old version, that is WinForms? So specifically for that, what Microsoft has given is something called as interoperability. So in case of WPF, you can develop a user control or custom control or in general a composite control, and then the libraries of these controls can very well be referred into existing WinForms applications itself. So I don't have existing WinForms application, but in that case what I'm going to do is, we are going to build one WinForm application wherein I will refer one of these user controls. So it can be currency converter, it can be demo animation. However, you can always build currency converter in case of WinForm. So what we will do, just to show the capability of Windows integration, what we will do is we will take this demo animation into something called as WinForms. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to close all these windows here. So let me close all documents here and let me create a new project which is going to be WinForm application. So I'm going to say new project. I'm going to pick up here a WinForm application using C#, using .NET framework. Let's say next, and let's call it as app for hosting WPF control. Now this feature is available in reverse way as well, which means if you really have existing WinForm application or control and you want to take it into WPF as it is, we still have the feature available, which is obviously backward compatibility. But this is more or less reverse compatibility we are talking from. So now what we have is old WinForm application look and feel here. So I don't want to restart Visual Studio, so I'm just going to keep it as it is and close this dialog which I have received. So let me close this pop-up. And in this WinForm application, what I wish to do is I wish to take the WPF control, which is demo animation control. So what do I do here? So a couple of things to do. In existing app for hosting WPF control, you will notice there are several libraries already referred into this project. These are routine .NET framework libraries. None of these libraries is actually for WPF, barring obviously basic common libraries like system, data and XML. But then there is no specific library over here which is added for the sake of interacting with WPF. Rather, we will have to add it, or it may get added automatically once we start dealing with this demo animation. So what am I supposed to do now? So here is what we will do. In order to deal with WPF control, the very first thing we need to do is we need to refer this demo animation DLL into WinForm application. So here's what we will do. In order to get it, let's say right click and add a reference. Pick up the demo animation DLL that we have. Either you can say browse and refer a DLL. Since I already had it referred in last demonstration, it can be seen in recent libraries or projects. I'll just click on OK. Now you'll find out there is demo animation which is only added over here. But then there are certain things that this demo animation is going to be dependent on. It is certainly dependent on certain WPF rendering logic as well. So only having demo animation is definitely not going to help me. So here is what I'm going to do. You can either manually refer those libraries that we require, or second option we have is I'm simply going to remove this library from here. Let's see how it can be automatically added. And then Visual Studio 2010 onwards, we have this feature that we can go to Toolbox of WinForm, and you will find out default, since they are part of the existing solution itself, you will notice that demo animation and CC control is also part of the toolbox, as you can notice here. If at all you don't see demo animation CC control over here, just because they are not part of this solution, what you can always do is you can always say right click here, and you can always pick up choose items here, and you can simply browse for that library, and then you can see that library added automatically over here. So nothing to worry at all. Either you say right click and browse for the DLL, or if it is WinForm project in the current solution of WPF library, you will find out that DLL can be seen over here itself. So now here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to simply drag and drop the content on my WinForm. Now see to it what happens behind the scene. If I just drag and drop this user control one, which is demo animation, just see over here what extra things get added once we drag and drop. So I'm simply going to drag and drop here. See now, the time you drag and drop this control, you will find out there are several libraries which are going to get added. Okay, there is some overflow that we have, doesn't matter. Look at the libraries added, guys. There is demo animation, there is presentation core and presentation framework. Combinedly, core and framework both represent WPF runtime. System.xaml is another library added. UI automation provider, and one of the very important library which is responsible for Windows and WPF interoperability is Windows Forms integration library, this one. So what is it that has happened over here? So let's try understanding what's the issue over here. Let me try maybe expanding these contents over here a bit. So we can just keep on ignoring these contents over here. Let's try to expand this window form. There is a little of rendering issue that we have, and this is the WPF content that we have right now. So I'm just going to expand it a bit, and then we will just ensure that these things exist. A simple machine rendering issue that we have right now. Okay, enough of content rendering that we have done. Okay, now let's try one more time by simply increasing the content. Okay, now that we have controls added over here, this doesn't look good at all. Okay, width wise maybe we need more size over here. Okay, so as of now we can consider like these elements exist in some order. I'm just going to dock it to the parent container. Okay, this doesn't look good again. If I just click on edit, okay, it takes me to XAML. Okay, so let's do one more thing now. What has happened behind the scene when I drag down of this content? If I just go to code, you will find out in the code behind there is no code added directly. But then since you know it very well that after you drag and drop any kind of a control, Windows Form or Visual Studio is just going to generate some code automatically, which always resides under this method called as initialize component, which this method lies in another partial class called as form1 itself. So let's do one thing. Let's take you to this method directly. Let me say right click here and let me say go to definition. Now notice here, what has happened is by default there is a user control object is going to get created, that is WPF control by default, and then there is location, the user controls certain details are mentioned. So I should mention here, okay, there's a simple object only. Now this object or this UI, which is a complex UI, which means drawing a ellipse and drawing a rectangle, then putting an animation against those elements. This is not routine in case of Windows Forms. So you will find out what happens is, to make sure that we can render these elements on a screen, we need a host. We need to put this user control inside one container, which is responsible for rendering this WPF control, even if the control is there inside WinForm. So which is that container? that container is called as element host. Now this element host container comes from system.windows.forms.integration. Now this is something that you have seen added in case of references. So what we have here, there's the element host location specified, size of the host specified, then tab index, some text, we can ignore this. And the important part to understand is this, that element host.child, which means in the container which is responsible for rendering WPF control, now we have added a child which is going to be a user control object. Now this user control object, once added, you will find out this .controls.add element host. So once we add, first we add the control inside a container called as element host, and then we add the element host inside a window form. Now here there's a thin difference. Like, why do I need this host? Why can't I simply just go and drag and drop it on top of WinForm? Keep it in mind, there are few things that we need to understand. In case of WinForm, it is typically pixel based graphics. When it comes to WPF, it is something which is DIP based graphics. Then, which means the scale is different. Then normally there are a couple of modes for rendering WPF control. Default is hardware, and then we can very well render it through software as well. If at all you see WPF controls are not working well or flicker a bit, in such cases you can very well change the controls rendering mode to software. So for example, if I just pick up here user control 1 dot, there is something which is called as, okay, there is a render transform which I don't need. Let me see, element host dot, okay, looks like we have lost the property. Let me check. So anyway, right now what we'll do is we will just try to have a basic run first, and then we will try putting it on a screen. So let's run this. I should have picked up WinForm as a startup project, so it's by default going to run the WPF project. Let me stop this project, and it will take time. And I want to run this app now, so I should say right click and say it as a startup project, and let me run this now. So see to it, a WinForm will run, and WinForm will host a WPF content. So this is form 1, and if I just click now, smoothly this transition happens. So I need not even have to look for the software rendering mode. So it worked well. So by default, you just have to use element host control. You can specify height and width to element host, and you can very well host your user control, which is WPF control or composite or custom control in WPF, into element host. It's that easy. So regarding rendering mode, we will come back to it after we see the other way of hosting, that is taking WinForm control into something called as WPF.